My name is Deborah Grant, 32 years old. That rainy night, I stood on the porch of my grandparents' house, my hands trembling as I held the old set of keys. Just a few hours earlier, the lawyer had announced that I was the sole heir to a $26 million estate. My whole family, my parents, younger brother, aunt and uncle, were stunned then turned furious. They demanded a share, and I refused. And right there, in the very house I had once called home, they threw me out and even stripped me of the apartment I had believed was under my name. Have you ever felt your own relatives turn into enemies because of money? If it were you, would you give in to keep the so-called family? Or would you hold on to the inheritance your grandparents trusted you with? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you can continue this journey with me. My childhood wasn't tied to fancy parties or luxurious vacations my parents often flaunted, but to the modest brick home of my grandparents, Eleanor and Walter. In the suburbs of Portland, that's where I learned to slow down, to live honestly, and to find joy in small things. They often reminded me, money is a tool, not the measure of your worth. Those words weren't just advice, they became a principle I lived by. I used to spend hours in the garage where my grandfather had started his business with nothing more than an old truck. From that, Grant Freight Logistics grew into a company spanning 3 states. Yet my grandparents kept their simple ways. She clipped coupons. He stayed loyal to his 20-year-old pickup truck. This contrast lit the spark of conflict in the family. My father always saw it as stinginess, an obstacle to his extravagant dreams. Once he snapped at the dinner table, "Dad owns a whole fleet of trucks, but still drives that rusty box. I'm ashamed to think what people must think of our family." Walter only smiled without answering, but his bright eyes told me clearly, he had nothing to prove. My grandparents believed true worth lay in how you treated people, not in outward shine. Unlike the distance from my parents, I received constant encouragement from my grandparents. When I decided to become an elementary school teacher, instead of going into business, my grandmother held my hand tight. "You plant seeds in children's hearts. That's a field richer than any company." Sunday dinners at their house became my anchor. My grandfather listened to my stories about students, sometimes teasing. "Any kid ever make you want to quit yet?" I laughed. "Of course. But then they make me laugh before I can stay angry." My grandmother always sent me home with a tin of buttery cookies, reminding me, "Give them to your students, they'll remember forever." One winter night, as the fire crackled, my grandfather suddenly pointed to the brickwork behind the fireplace. His eyes lit with secrecy. "Behind that, I've hidden a map, a trail map, so when storms hit the family, the one holding the key will know where to go." I giggled, thinking he was joking, but the fleeting seriousness in his eyes haunted me ever since. Amid those warm moments, the tension with my parents and Aunt Lorraine never stopped growing. My father often came by only to ask for loans, then stormed off when refused. My mother wrinkled her nose at the old kitchen, muttering coldly, "If Eleanor would spend money, this place could look like a hotel." And Aunt Lorraine liked to brag about being the founder's daughter at her club, though she was rarely around when my grandparents actually needed her. I gradually became the only one who shared my grandparents' simple habits. I learned to bake from my grandmother, to change a tire from my grandfather. Once, standing among the tomato plants, he told me, "Business is like gardening. If you think only about picking fruit without tending each root, soon the garden will be bare." Those words later became my lifeline when I faced the harshest conflicts. At my parents' house, the rare dinners were often cut short by business calls. At my grandparents', every Sunday dinner was a ritual of love. That contrast made it clear, I belonged somewhere else, where value wasn't measured in money. Back then, I had no idea all those simple lessons, along with that vague promise of a trail map, would become the only key keeping me standing when the real storm came. The rain outside pounding heavier, drumming against the windows like a reminder no one could ignore. On the old wooden table lay the thick envelope from Lawyer Samuel. I had opened it, but what shook my heart wasn't the legal documents or deeds. It was a small stack of handwritten pages from Eleanor, conditioned to keep the inheritance. "In the first 48 hours, you must protect what we've left against every pressure from relatives. Do not give in unreasonably. Do not use violence. This is not only property, it is the test of a lifetime." I read every word again and again, trembling yet illuminated. They hadn't left only assets. They left a trial, a spiritual legacy to decide if I was worthy. Time was already ticking, and I knew one misstep could erase their will. As I wrestled with my emotions, a knock sounded at the door. I stepped carefully and peeked through the small glass pane. It was Hank Rivera, the housing manager and longtime supervisor of Walter's truck fleet. His weathered face, marked by labor, was wet from the rain. He held a laptop bag in hand. "Miss Deborah." He spoke in a steady, low voice. "I think it's time I give this to you." I opened the door and invited him in. The room carried the damp scent of wood, mixed with the faint tea fragrance Eleanor had kept in porcelain jars. Hank set the bag on the table and pulled out a black hard drive labeled in familiar handwriting. "System Update 2022. Walter asked me to replace the whole security system a year ago. He didn't trust the old one your father installed. He told me, when the time comes, give this to Deborah." Hank explained, looking straight at me. "I think now is the time." I held the hard drive, my heartbeat pounding. Another layer of protection my grandparents had prepared. We booted up the computer and connected it. The screen filled with folders, camera files by date, month, year, recordings of every time my relatives had entered the house. There was my father walking in anxiously, pushing papers at Walter to sign. My mother rummaging through kitchen cabinets, thinking no one saw. Aunt Lorraine snapping sharply at Eleanor on the porch, her voice dripping with spite. My hands trembled, not from shock, but from the clarity of exposure. The truth had always been here, waiting for me to need it. As Hank prepared to unplug the drive, I suddenly remembered the small wooden recipe box in the kitchen, the one my grandmother always used. I hurried there, pulled open the drawer. Just as I sensed, it was still there among the yellowed pages of apple pie and butter cookie recipes. At the bottom lay a small blue USB drive, marked with a hand-drawn bird. I gasped. "Bluebird." I plugged the USB into the computer. The screen lit with a single folder named for Deborah. Inside were videos of my grandparents sitting before the camera, dates carefully stamped on the corner. Walter looked straight into the lens, his voice deep but gentle. "If you're watching this, it means we're gone. You need to know, what's coming isn't by chance. Your family will come demanding, pressuring. You must stand firm, Deborah." Then Eleanor continued, her eyes soft yet resolute. "They will call you selfish. They will try to make you feel guilty. But the truth is, we've seen how they treat each other and us. You are the only one who never came for money. We leave this proof so you never doubt yourself." I bit my lip, tears streaming as I heard her voice. The USB contained not only their words but recordings. My father angrily demanding quick investment returns. Aunt Lorraine crying for tuition money, then later joking on the phone it was just a trick. My mother complaining that my grandparents made her embarrassed with friends by living old-fashioned. All of it captured, unedited. I listened to every piece, pain mixing with clarity. There was no room left for doubt. My phone buzzed hard, cutting through the tense air. The screen lit up with Travis's name. A short message, "At 10 a.m. tomorrow, we're coming to take back the family's belongings. Don't stop us." I showed it to Hank. He frowned. "They think this is a game. But you're not alone." I leaned back in the chair, my thoughts tangled. My grandparents had foreseen even this, the first 48 hours. And the trial had truly begun. Hank set his hand on the table, his voice steady. "Miss Deborah, rest tonight. Tomorrow, when they come, you'll have people by your side. Your grandparents built an entire network for you." I looked out the window. The rain still fell in long streaks. My reflection in the glass looked small but resolute. Inside me, my grandfather's voice echoed, "The trail map. So when the storm comes, the one holding the key will know where to go." Maybe that path was opening right in front of me, and I had to step into it no matter how much I trembled. The next morning, before the clock struck 10, the sound of engines rumbled outside, one car after another pulling up to my grandparents' gate. In the living room, my hands gripping the teacup Eleanor once used, my heart torn between fear and resolve. Hank had already switched on the camera screen in the kitchen, so every corner of the house was covered. Beside me, Judge Helena Brooks radiated a calm so steady it seemed to slow time itself. Police Chief Mariah Green stayed with arms folded, her eyes sharp. Nora Whitaker and Lydia Cho, two women who had once worked closely with my grandparents, took across the table ready with thick files. I was no longer alone, yet my heart still pounded when the front door opened. My father Martin entered first. He wore a dark suit, his eyes hardened with resentment. My mother followed, lips painted a sharp red, her face cold. Aunt Lorraine swept and draped in a luxurious coat, her heels striking the floor in defiance, while Uncle Mitch kept his head down, his eyes evasive. Travis, my younger brother, leaned back like this was nothing but entertainment. Walking beside them was an unfamiliar man carrying a black briefcase, clearly the lawyer they had rushed to hire. "Deborah. My father began, his voice rigid, "stop dragging out this play. Sign the transfer papers now, and this will all end cleanly. This isn't a play, Dad. This is our grandparents' will, and I have a duty to honor it. My mother cut in immediately, her voice sharp as steel. Sweetheart, you're still young, naive. This money is far too much for you to manage. Our family knows how. Judge Helena raised her brow, interjecting, I'm sorry, but I must remind you Deborah has been legally designated. Her grandparents' wishes are crystal clear. Their lawyer scoffed, such wishes can be challenged. There's no shortage of cases where heirs influence the elderly. Hearing it sent a pang through me, but I kept my face still. Before I could reply, Lydia spoke. She pulled a file from her folder and dropped it firmly on the table. This is proof of a loan taken by Mr. Martin. From Grant Freight Logistics, $200,000 more than 10 years ago, never repaid. The room fell silent. My father froze for a moment, then snapped. Lies, every paper bears his signature, and the company seal. Lydia's voice stayed firm. Walter kept them, and I was the witness who signed at the time. My mother's face shifted, trying to deflect. A family loan, nothing serious. Before she could finish, Hank switched on the large wall monitor. Crisp footage from the updated cameras appeared. My mother and Aunt Lorraine right after the funeral opening, Eleanor's jewelry cabinet, slipping small boxes into their bags. This was recorded the night of the funeral. Hank said slowly, no edits. Stored directly on the cloud system. Aunt Lorraine's face turned crimson, her hand clutching her purse. She shouted, don't twist it. I was only checking keepsakes. Chief Mariah's voice cut through, unwavering. If needed, I'll file a report right here. I looked at each face, angry, ashamed, unsettled, and felt my heart turn cold. Everything my grandparents had said in their recordings stood before me now. They weren't here for family. They were here for what they called their share. My father slammed his hand on the table, grasping for control. All of this is manipulation. Deborah, you think you're so clever. You're being used by these advisors to fight against your own blood. I straightened my back, my voice calm. No one is using me. I'm doing exactly what my grandparents told me, protecting the legacy with truth and boundaries. You'll regret this. We'll sue. We'll make the whole city believe you conned to old people out of their fortune. Judge Helena placed her hand on the table, her eyes locked on them. If you choose that path, prepare yourselves. The evidence is overwhelming. And I will testify in court, Nora added, her tone gentle but firm. I worked with Eleanor and Walter for over 20 years. They were never led by anyone. They chose Deborah because she is the only one who lived by the values they cherished. The pendulum clock ticked steadily, punctuating the tension. Then Travis let out a mocking laugh, shattering the silence. This is all theater. Just wait. Sooner or later someone will believe us over a bunch of spliced videos. I turned to him, seeing not only arrogance in his eyes, but recklessness too. You can spread lies, I said slowly, but the truth always comes back. And you know our grandparents recorded everything more than once. Travis flinched for a moment, then masked it with a smirk. They began to retreat, not in acceptance but with dark promises. As my father stepped through the doorway, he turned to glare at me. This isn't over. The door closed, leaving a heavy void behind. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the clear knowledge that the real fight had only begun. Yet within me, Walter's voice rang louder than ever. Hold the boundary. Don't yield. I placed my hand on the stack of documents, my eyes meeting those of my allies. Alone in my family, yes, but not utterly alone. And the 48-hour trial my grandparents set was entering its fiercest chapter. When the house grew quiet again after the stormy confrontation, I sat silently before the fireplace. The flames had died, leaving only gray ash, speckled with glowing embers like small eyes still watching. In my mind, the joke my grandfather once told replayed. Behind the fireplace there's a trail map. I had laughed then, thinking he was teasing his granddaughter. But now, when every word they left carried hidden weight, I knew it wasn't simple. I running my hands along the smoke-darkened bricks. One brick near the bottom corner felt loose. I pressed it lightly. The sound was faint but firm, unlike the usual hollow thud. My heart pounded. I crouched down using both hands to push. The brick shifted, revealing a small latch inside. When I pulled it, a whole section of brick tilted outward, exposing a narrow passage just big enough for one person to stoop through. Hank passed by, surprised to see me kneeling at the fireplace. Deborah, what are you doing? My grandfather once said there was a trail map behind the fireplace. I answered, my voice trembling with anticipation. Maybe this is what he meant. We took flashlights and stepped down creaky wooden stairs. The cellar wasn't large, but it was clean, carrying the scent of wood and dry paper. A metal chest rested in the center, its lid engraved with the letters E.W. Eleanor Walter Grant. My fingers brushed the surface before I opened it. Inside, beyond the familiar musty scent of old paper, were carefully stamped folders. On top lay a thick white envelope, handwritten, "For Deborah, open only when you truly need." I drew a deep breath and tore the seal. Inside were two things, a detailed shareholding chart and a handwritten letter from Eleanor. Her script was gentle yet firm. "My dear girl, when everyone fights over the slice of cake, remember to protect the oven. The Evergreen Trust is that oven. It holds not only the assets, but the soul of this company. If you choose to sign the long-haul safety pledge, all hidden control will pass to you. Share the rewards not by handing out loose change, but by committing long-term to those who keep the wheels turning, the drivers and the generations after them." I read each line with tears welling. Beneath the letter lay a thick file, Evergreen Trust. According to the charts, beyond the assets already disclosed in the will, my grandparents had established a hidden trust, holding key shares in Grant Freight Logistics. The trust had never been revealed, and it activated only when the heir signed the long-haul safety pledge, dedicating 5% of annual profits to driver safety programs and vocational scholarships for their children. Good heavens, Hank whispered, eyes wide. This is the real weapon. Evergreen Trust controls enough shares to tip the entire balance. I picked up the long-haul safety pledge. The paper was thick stock with space below for a signature and date. My hand trembled as I held the pen. Then I remembered Walter's eyes the day he taught me to change a tire, and Eleanor's hand on my shoulder when I chose to become a teacher. I signed my name, the strokes bold and decisive. The moment I finished the last of Hank snapped a photo of the signed document and sent it to lawyer Samuel. He replied immediately, "Evergreen Trust is activated. Congratulations, Deborah." I hadn't even exhaled when a knock sounded upstairs. We hurried back up. At the door stood a tall woman with neatly pinned gray hair and clear, steady eyes. She introduced herself. "I'm Rosa Martinez. I once ran the local infrastructure fund with Eleanor and Walter. They designated me as co-protector of Evergreen Trust." I had heard Rosa's name in my grandmother's stories, but we had never met. Rosa stepped in, shook my hand, and gripped firmly. "They trusted you. Now I will trust you too. Evergreen Trust isn't just paperwork. It's a network of hundreds of drivers, families, and communities this company has supported." She opened her own file and laid out public benefit agreements my grandparents had signed with the city, building safe rest stops for drivers, vocational scholarships for local youth to learn trucking, and a fund to support families in the event of workplace accidents. "All of it is waiting for your hand to carry it forward," Rosa said, her eyes solemn. "And I will oversee it with you." I felt a new strength flow in my veins. I was no longer a lone elementary school teacher, fighting a greedy family. I had become the one holding the key to the oven. As evening fell, we signed the minutes confirming the activation of Evergreen Trust. Immediately, the advisor sent notices. The share ratio now tilted decisively toward me and the group loyal to my grandparents. My family could scream and sue, but from now on they no longer held real power. In the kitchen under the warm yellow light, Rosa looked at me and smiled. "Eleanor once told me, Deborah won't choose the easy path, but she will choose the right one." Now I see she was right. Gratitude and resolve rising in me. My grandparents had prepared everything, but the final step was left to me. And I had chosen. On the corner of the table, Eleanor's letter lay open. The phrase, "Protect the oven," seeming to glow brighter under the late-night light. That reminder was no longer a metaphor. It was the reality I was living. After Evergreen Trust was activated, my family struck back. Lawyer Samuel called me early in the morning, his voice firm but still carrying his usual gentleness. "Deborah, they just filed a petition to freeze all assets. Their argument centers on your lack of management capacity and signs of manipulating the elderly. But I've prepared the rebuttal." I gripped the phone, both trembling and hardening inside. Samuel explained he would submit my complete credentials, transcripts, teaching certification, and a stack of positive evaluations from parents and colleagues. More importantly, he would file all the video journals my grandparents had left, along with medical assessments proving they were fully lucid when drafting the will. "We won't only defend," Samuel said, "we'll go on the offensive with the truth." News of the lawsuit quickly spread through the community, but contrary to what my parents hoped, the outrage didn't fall on me. Instead, the drivers' union, people who had been with my grandparents for decades, called an emergency meeting. I was invited to attend. In the large hall of the union, Hundreds of drivers and their families stayed when I entered. They raised hand-lettered signs. "We stand with Deborah." A gray-bearded man, Mr. Carl, stepped forward to speak. "Walter and Eleanor took care of us for years, from health insurance to scholarships for our kids. Now their granddaughter is being slandered. We won't stand by." Neighbors around the farm also signed a letter of support, recounting how my grandparents had quietly paid hospital bills, repaired roofs for the elderly, living alone, and supplied food to struggling families without leaving their names. The letter went straight to the court. A community wall standing behind me. What truly stunned me was the appearance of Dr. Ayesha Patel, who had run a community health program funded by my grandparents. She showed up at the hearing as a witness. Her voice was clear, her gaze direct. "I can confirm that Colleen, Deborah's mother, once suggested I skim a portion of the patient fund to host a social event. I refused. But that incident has haunted me for years." The courtroom murmured. My parents' faces drained of color, while Aunt Lorraine hurriedly grabbed her phone, pretending to be busy. But they didn't stop. That very evening, an anonymous account began posting online that I was a hypocrite, claiming I used the image of a kind schoolteacher to hide a scheme to seize assets. They spliced footage of me holding the keys to my grandparents' home and added defamatory captions. The rumors spread fast, and I knew exactly whose hand was behind it. Chief Mariah Green, with the help of the local cyber unit, traced it. After 2 days, she came to my house and set a thin file on the table. The IP originated from the law office handling Aunt Loren's assets. They hired an outside party, but foolishly left a trail leading back to their own workplace. I bit my lip, unsure whether to be angry or heartsick. My own blood would stop at nothing to take me down. But the real shock came late one night. As I was organizing documents in the study, an anonymous email flashed on the screen. Just one line. "Check warehouse for North Door. Warehouse 4. One of the company's largest storage sites on the city's outskirts." I read it over and over, my heart racing. Who sent this? Why mention the North Door? I called Samuel and Hank immediately. Samuel's voice was grave. "We must be cautious. This could be a trap, but it could also be a real lead." Hank clenched his fist. Warehouse 4 was a point Walter valued highly. If something's off, that's exactly where we need to look. Two emotions tore at me, fear and resolve. My grandparents' layered plans kept unfolding as if they were still guiding me. Maybe that email wasn't random. Maybe the trail map had many turns I hadn't reached yet. I looked up at them and said slowly, firmly, "We'll go to Warehouse 4. But we'll do it my grandparents' way." Transparent, aboveboard, with witnesses present. Outside the window, streetlights cast a gray wash over the night sky. I saw my reflection in the glass. Tired but no longer trembling. This smear campaign might exhaust me, but I knew one thing. My grandparents never left me to walk alone, and Warehouse 4 might be the next step on the trail they had quietly drawn. That night, Hank and I drove straight to Warehouse 4. Lydia Cho came too, carrying a thick stack of financial records. Before leaving the house, I called Chief Mariah Green, clearly stating the time and location and asking her to send a quiet support team. I didn't want the inspection to turn into a public clash, but I would not step into the dark alone. Warehouse 4 sat on the edge of the industrial zone, rows of warehouses lined up. Dim amber lights high above spilling onto the cold pavement. When Hank opened the north gate, the hinges screeched, echoing through the vast space. Inside, dust drifted in our flashlight beams. The shelving stretched high. I quickly noticed many crates were sealed too recently with unfamiliar labels, and some crates were completely empty. "This is phantom inventory," Lydia whispered, tapping a wooden crate. The hollow sound rang out. "On paper it says, fully received, but in reality there's nothing here." Hank frowned, studying the paperwork clipped to a pallet. "The invoice lists more than 50 industrial generators, but there isn't a single one on site." We probed deeper into the small office within the warehouse. On the desk, an auxiliary server and NAS system were still running. Lydia connected quickly and skimmed through the files. The screen filled with spreadsheets under a single name, Black Ledger. After Evergreen Trust was activated, my family struck back. Lawyer Samuel called me at dawn, his voice firm, yet still carrying its familiar calm. "Deborah, they just filed a petition to freeze all assets. Their argument revolves around your lack of managerial capacity and signs of manipulating the elderly. But I've prepared the rebuttal." I gripped the phone, feeling both shaky and steeled. Samuel explained he would submit my full credentials, transcripts, teaching certification, along with a series of positive evaluations from parents and colleagues. More importantly, he would file all the video journals my grandparents left, plus medical assessments proving they were fully lucid when they made the will. "We won't only defend," Samuel said. "We'll go on the offensive with the truth." News of the lawsuit spread quickly through the community, but contrary to what my parents hoped, the outrage didn't fall on me. Instead, the drivers' union, those who had been with my grandparents for decades, called an emergency meeting. I was invited to attend. In the large hall of the union, hundreds of drivers and their families stood when I walked in. They held up hand-lettered signs, "We stand with Deborah." A gray-bearded man, Mr. Carl, stepped up to speak. "Walter and Eleanor took care of us for years, from health insurance to scholarships for our kids. Now their granddaughter is being slandered and we will not sit still." Neighbors around the farm also signed a letter of support, recounting the times my grandparents quietly paid hospital bills, repaired roofs for those living alone, or supplied food to struggling families without leaving their names. That letter went straight to the court. A community wall standing behind me. What truly stunned me was the appearance of Dr. Aisha Patel, who had led a community health program funded by my grandparents. She appeared at the hearing as a witness. Her voice was crisp, her eyes direct. "I can confirm that Ms. Colleen, Deborah's mother, once suggested I skim a portion of the patient fund to host a social event. I refused, but that incident has haunted me for years." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. My parents' faces went pale, while Aunt Lorraine hurriedly grabbed her phone, pretending to be busy. But they didn't stop. That very night, an anonymous account started spreading claims online that I was a hypocrite, that I was using the image of a kind teacher to hide a scheme to seize assets. They spliced footage of me holding the keys to my grandparents' house and added defamatory captions. The rumors spread quickly and I knew exactly whose hand was behind it. Chief Mariah Green, with the local cyber unit's help, traced it. After 2 days, she came to my house and set a thin file on the table. The IP originated from the law office managing Aunt Lorraine's assets. They hired an outsider but foolishly left a trail back to their own workplace. I bit my lip, torn between anger and bitterness. My own blood wouldn't stop at any trick to bring me down. But the real shock came late one night. As I was sorting papers in the study, an anonymous email flashed on my screen. Only one line. "Check Warehouse 4, North Door, Warehouse 4." One of the company's largest storage sites on the city's outskirts. I read it again and again, my heart racing. Who sent this email? Why mention the North Door? I called Samuel and Hank immediately. Samuel's voice was grave. "We must be careful. This could be a trap, but it could also be a real lead." Hank clenched his fist. Warehouse 4 was a point Walter valued highly. If anything is off, that's where we need to look. Two feelings wrestled inside me: fear and resolve. My grandparents' layered plans kept unfolding as if they were still guiding me. Maybe that email wasn't random. Maybe the trail map still had turns I hadn't reached. I lifted my head and spoke slowly, firmly. "We'll go to Warehouse 4. But we'll do it my grandparents' way. Transparent, above board, and with witnesses." Outside the window,